Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I direct my question to the Prime Minister, and I draw the Prime Minister's attention to the claim by Ms Laura Tingle at the launch of her new book, Chasing the Future, that her book documents your, quote, greatest culpability in the lead-up to the recession, which was that you I'm quoting, Mr Speaker, consistently lied about the fact that the government was pushing up interest rates in 1988. Given this documented history of dishonesty in relation to economic policy, why should anyone believe you when you say that you won't push up interest rates to 14% or more? Why should anyone believe that you have abandoned the policies which have caused mass unemployment and which have widened the gap between the rich and the poor in our society and made Australia a more unequal and inegalitarian society?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, where do I start with that? I think I need some direction from you. Now, Mr Speaker...
Order! Those on my left.
Mr
I'm
Speaker,
sure the Leader of the Opposition wants to hear the answer.
Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, I thought the Governor of the Reserve Bank rather eloquently defended my position in launching Ms Tingle's book. And he knows because he was around as Secretary of the Treasury and as Governor of the Central Bank. And Mr Speaker, I've read in this House before things which the former Governor had to say, and he said you need to. He talked about dealings with the government being such that the propriety of them and that the way in which the government related to the bank was such that there was never any pressure other than proper discussion about a shared interest in the monetary environment. And he said you have to be around a long time to know that this was not always so.
That's right.
Do you remember that quote from Bob Johnson? Remember that quote? And guess who he was talking about? Now, Mr Speaker, I'm surprised that Laura Tingle even implied any of this because when I resigned as Treasurer in June 1991, there was a tear and a eye at the press conference. There was, and I was both, Mr Speaker, touched and flattered. I was. I thought, well, you know, you've got the cut and thrust of all these things, and the journos pushing questions to you, but as you're going out, I mean, a little tear here and there is rather moving. And I thought that I do count her as a supporter, and I think therefore that any references she's made are probably I haven't seen the text, so I don't know whether they're implied or they're explicit, but they would be without understanding the nuances of monetary policy at the time, which were not simple to understand for an outsider.
Order. Resume your seat.
Well,
Mr.
Speaker, maybe that's the sort of thing that you did when you said you didn't attend a League of Rights meeting. Right? Maybe that's what you did when you said you attended a Christian meeting. Right? Maybe that's what you did when you said you got a motion at the corroboree that you hadn't yet attended.
Order. The Prime Minister might resume his seat. The member for
Yes, I think that I wish to raise 145 and relevance, and seeing it's your decision the Prime Minister can stray, what about his visit to the Muslims?
No, you've raised your point.
Criticised in racist terms the Jews that you did.
Order.
Go and talk a bit more about your visits.
Order. The member for O'Connor consistently flouts.
You got naming.
No. Consistently flouts. Order. The member for O'Connor consistently flouts coming to the dispatch box, taking points, and he still talks while I am. You consistently flout your authority by coming to this dispatch box, taking points of order, and then continuing to yell when you've been told to take your seat. You have therefore offended the standing orders, and under 304A you may remove yourself for 1 hour. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I distinctly, the member, the Leader of the Opposition, saying he got very emotional at the corroboree.
Before he got there.
And that he had to make references to, in that famous Burke and Wills style of trip to the inland. But a journalist had the cheek to point out that when he made the remark, he hadn't yet attended the corroboree. Now, maybe, Mr. Speaker, that's the sort of lie that he refers to, and he says, what colour socks are they wearing? And they're wearing green socks and say red, it's a blatant lie. Maybe that's the sort of lie he's talking about.
Prime Minister might just wait for a moment. The member for Gainsey's on a point of order.
On a point of order, understanding Order 145 and relevance, when will you ask this man to get out of the gutter and answer the question properly?
Order. In the order, the question that was asked by the Leader of the Opposition specifically talked about lies. It was in the quote that the Honourable Honourable Leader of the Opposition used, and the Prime Minister is going to the substance of that question. The Prime Minister.
On the first question, of course, I do recall Mr. Izzy Liebler saying he phoned Mr. Downer at the time and told him it was a League of Rights meeting. And I also recall, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Opposition, seeing as the member for, I can't remember his seat, what was his name, Tuckey? O'Connor. The member for O'Connor made a reference to the Jewish community of the Leader of the Opposition telling Mr. Izzy Liebler's brother last week that if they criticised the government's legislation, that he would hop into them, and that he would remove any access by the Jewish community to the opposition.
Prime Minister will resume his seat. The Leader of the National Party on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, clearly the Prime Minister has now strayed well beyond the ambit of the question. He should be directed by you to come back to the question, and immediately so.
The Prime Minister, I think, is getting a touch away from the substance if he could come back to the issue.
But I just thought I just remind people that this naked threat to the Jewish community and their access to the coalition should become a matter of record, given the fact that Mr. Liebler was outraged by what you said to him. Now, Mr. Speaker...
Order. No, the Prime Minister is coming to the substance of the
Mr. Speaker, let me conclude on this point. In the past, I've been very touched by Ms. Tingle's concern for my role as Treasurer and her interest in my career.
The Deputy Leader.
But she's not to know the nuances of monetary policy, which are always complex, and if one is not an insider, can't know it all. And I'm very much in the debt of the Central Bank Governor for correcting her error in this case.
The Honourable Member for Eden Monaro.